Emily Parker did not plan to stand still that evening, but the quiet pulled her in. The house felt too large for two people who barely spoke. Outside, rain slid down the glass in thin lines, turning the street into a blur of lights and shadows. Inside, the kitchen clock ticked too loud. Daniel had been home for hours, yet she had not seen him. She knew where he was without asking. The garage had become his refuge, a place where answers did not need words. She tried to focus on small tasks. She rinsed a mug, wiped the counter, folded a towel. Each movement felt sharp, rushed, like she was racing against a thought she did not want to catch. The sound from the garage started again, steady and low, the hum of a machine waking up. It was familiar, but tonight it felt different, heavier. Emily paused, listening. Daniel rarely used his full toolkit unless he was serious about something. That kit had followed him through years of projects and plans. It meant commitment. It meant focus. Emily opened the door to the hallway and stood there. The hum grew clearer. She remembered when that sound used to make her smile. It meant Daniel was building something for them. A shelf, a table, a future. Now it made her stomach tighten. She stepped into the garage. The air smelled of wood and oil. Daniel stood with his back to her, sleeves rolled, shoulders tense. He did not turn when he heard her. He adjusted his grip, checked a measurement, and continued. The workbench light cast long shadows, making the room feel smaller. The walls were lined with tools, neat and ready, like soldiers waiting for orders. "I just need a little more time," Daniel said, without looking up. His voice was calm, but tired. Emily felt the words land and settle between them. Time had become his answer to everything. Time to think, time to work, time to breathe, time to avoid. She wanted to ask what he was making. She wanted to ask why he was pulling away. She wanted to ask if he still loved her. Instead, she said nothing. She watched his hands move with care, strong and precise. Those hands used to reach for hers without thinking. Now they stayed busy, safe behind tools and tasks. Emily turned back toward the house. The hum followed her, steady as a heartbeat that was not her own. Later, in their bedroom, she sat on the edge of the bed and removed her shoes. The room was dim, familiar, and suddenly foreign. Photos lined the dresser, frozen smiles from better days. Trips, holidays, small moments that once felt endless. She lay back and stared at the ceiling, counting slow breaths. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She ignored it. Then it buzzed again. It was a message from Ryan. Ryan worked with her at the marketing firm in Seattle. They shared deadlines, jokes, and long calls during late nights. He asked how she was, not out of habit, but with attention. He noticed when she sounded tired. He remembered small details. He did not flirt. He did not push. That was what made it dangerous. Emily turned the phone face down. She closed her eyes, but her mind stayed awake. She thought of Daniel in the garage, alone with his thoughts. She thought of herself on the road between cities, feeling lighter when someone listened. She felt a sharp edge of guilt and pushed it away. Nothing had happened. Nothing had crossed a line. Still, the space inside her heart felt wider than it should. The next morning moved fast. Daniel left early, coffee untouched. Emily grabbed her bag and rushed out, late for the train. The city woke around her, busy and loud, offering comfort and motion. On the ride north, she stared out the window and watched the landscape change. Trees, roads, water, sky. Movement helped her breathe. At work, the pace was relentless. Meetings stacked, calls overlapped, emails demanded answers. Emily focused and delivered, as she always did. Ryan sat across from her during a planning session, calm and clear. When the meeting ended, he smiled and said, "Good work." Simple words, warm tone. Emily nodded and felt a small lift she did not ask for. They walked to lunch with a group, but the conversation thinned until it was just the two of them. Ryan talked about a project, about ideas and risks. Emily listened, engaged. For a moment, she forgot the quiet house and the humming garage. She forgot the distance that waited at home. On the train ride back that evening, the lift faded. The questions returned. She wondered if she was being unfair to Daniel. She wondered if she had waited too long to speak. She wondered if love could survive silence. When she got home, the garage door was open. Light spilled onto the driveway. Emily slowed, heart beating faster. She stepped inside. Daniel stood at the bench again, focused, careful. The machine was off now. The room was quiet. "Dinner's ready," she said. "In a minute," he replied. She watched him finish a small step, then set a piece aside. He finally turned and looked at her. His eyes were tired, but soft. For a moment, it felt like years ago, when words came easily. The moment passed. At dinner, they talked about safe things: work, weather, a neighbor's new dog. They avoided the sharp edges. Emily ate slowly. Daniel barely touched his plate. That night, she dreamed of walking through a long hallway with many doors. Each door was a choice she had not made. When she woke, the feeling stayed with her. Days blurred. Travel, meetings, quick calls home. Daniel stayed in the garage. Emily stayed busy. The distance grew without a fight, without a clear moment to blame. That was the hardest part. There was no single mistake, only many small steps away from each other. One evening, Emily returned early. The house was quiet. The garage door was closed. She hesitated, then opened it. Daniel stood still, staring at the workbench. The project was covered with a cloth. "I finished," he said. Emily stepped closer. Her heart raced. He did not lift the cloth. He ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "Not sure when to show you," he added. "Show me what?" she asked. He shook his head. Soon the answer left her both relieved and uneasy. Secrets, even gentle ones, weighed heavy. She nodded and left him there. Later, alone in the living room, Emily picked up her phone. A message from Ryan waited, asking if she had made it home safe. She typed a reply, then erased it. She typed again, shorter this time. She sent it and set the phone down. She knew she was standing on a thin line. She knew attention could turn into attachment if she let it. She promised herself she would not let it happen. Promises were easier to make than to keep. That night, the hum did not return. The house felt still, like it was holding its breath. Emily lay awake, listening to the quiet. Daniel slept beside her, turned away. She thought of the covered project in the garage. She thought of the choices behind each door in her dream. She thought of the small space between right and wrong and how easy it was to drift into it without noticing. Outside, rain started again, soft at first, then steady. Emily closed her eyes and felt the weight of love, doubt, and hope pressing together. Morning would come fast. Answers might not. And in the silence, with the garage dark and the phone face down, Emily knew one thing had already changed. The questions were no longer distant. They were close, waiting, and ready to be faced. Emily Parker's flight landed in Vancouver on a crisp, late afternoon. The city smelled of salt and rain, and the streets buzzed with the quiet energy of people hurrying to work, to home, to life. She had come for a short work trip, but her mind felt heavier than her suitcase. Ryan was waiting at a small cafe near the waterfront, a place he had suggested weeks ago. He arrived early, sitting with his hands folded, eyes calm but full of something unsaid. Emily ordered coffee but could barely taste it. Her mind ran in circles, thinking of Daniel, of the garage, of the covered project he had refused to reveal. The distance between them had become a weight she could no longer ignore. Ryan didn't speak immediately. He didn't need to. Emily felt the quiet pressing, the gap between words, like the space she had felt at home with Daniel. Finally, Ryan said, "You don't look happy." His voice was soft, almost hesitant, but full of concern. Emily looked down at the cup, feeling the warmth seep into her hands. She had never considered her feelings a problem. She had always believed love was simple if you worked at it. But now, she realized it could be messy and unpredictable. "I don't know what I am anymore," she admitted, her voice low, shaky. The words felt strange leaving her lips, like admitting a secret she had been avoiding for months. Ryan nodded, understanding more than she expected. He didn't push, didn't offer easy solutions. He only listened, the kind of listening that made a person feel less alone. Emily wanted to stay in that moment, in the quiet understanding, but reality was always waiting. She had a home, a husband, and a life that required answers she was not ready to give. Back in Portland, Daniel worked in the garage. Emily imagined him there, surrounded by tools, carefully adjusting something unseen. He had always found comfort in fixing things, in making order from chaos. Yet, lately, the garage had become a symbol of everything that had gone unspoken between them. He avoided conversations, avoided the kitchen table where meals had once been shared. The wooden frame he was crafting, she did not know it yet, was meant to remind them of what they had lost. Or what they could still find. Emily walked along the waterfront in Vancouver after leaving the cafe, feeling the wind tug at her hair. She watched boats sway gently, waves breaking against the pier. She thought about Daniel, about the way he had avoided her eyes at dinner, about the hum of tools late at night. She felt a mixture of guilt, longing, and fear. She wanted to trust him, to believe that love could survive silence. But she feared that the silence had already spoken for them. Every choice, every unspoken word felt like it was building a wall between them, thicker with each passing day. The next morning, Emily wandered the streets of Vancouver before her meeting. She felt the city's rhythm, people hurrying, rushing, living. It reminded her of what she and Daniel had once been: energetic, full of plans, full of shared dreams. She stopped at a small bookstore, running her fingers along the spines of old novels, imagining evenings when she and Daniel had sat together, reading in the glow of a single lamp. Memories of warmth and laughter mingled with the weight of recent distance. She wondered if those memories were enough to bring them back, or if they were merely reminders of something irretrievably changed. Later that week, Emily returned to Portland earlier than planned. The house greeted her with its usual quiet, but the garage door caught her eye immediately. Daniel was there, standing at the workbench, with a cloth covering something he had built. He looked up, startled, but then softened. His hands were still steady, precise, but there was a tension in his shoulders that she had not noticed before. Emily approached slowly, unsure if she was walking into forgiveness or a confrontation. "I finished," Daniel said quietly. His voice carried the weight of weeks of work, both on the project and on himself. Emily stepped closer, heart racing. She could see the outline of the object under the cloth, but she did not move to uncover it. The room was filled with the quiet hum of anticipation, a silence that spoke louder than words. "I'm not sure when to show you," he added, almost apologetically. "Show me what?" Emily asked, keeping her voice even, though her chest tightened. She did not want to feel the sharp edge of disappointment if the project was not what she hoped it would be. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from years ago, a sign of his nervousness and thoughtfulness. He shook his head gently. "Soon," he said. That evening, Emily prepared dinner with a careful, measured calm. She set the table as she had done countless times before. Yet every movement felt heavier, burdened by unspoken questions. Daniel entered later, hands still smelling faintly of wood and polish, and they ate in quiet. Words were minimal, exchanged in polite sentences about work and neighbors. Every glance, every pause seemed loaded with meaning they could not yet name. After dinner, Emily sat in the living room, staring at the rain streaking down the windows. She thought of Ryan, of his calm presence, of how easy it had felt to talk to him. She also thought of Daniel, of his quiet persistence, of the way he had always worked to create, to build, to repair. She realized that love was not simple, not linear. It was messy and unpredictable, filled with moments of doubt and longing, of mistakes and hope. The days that followed were a careful dance. Emily and Daniel found small ways to reconnect. They revisited old routines, shared small jokes, and allowed quiet moments to stretch longer. Emily watched Daniel in the garage, still building, still focused. And she felt a small spark of the connection they had once shared. It was fragile, delicate, but it existed. They both knew the future was uncertain, but they had begun to acknowledge it together. Emily realized that infidelity was rarely about a single moment. It was about distance, neglect, and the quiet drifting of hearts. Ryan's presence had been a mirror, showing her what she missed, what she longed for. But it had not been the cause of destruction. The true challenge was facing the gaps in her marriage and deciding if love was strong enough to bridge them. One evening, Daniel finally revealed the project in the garage. It was a wooden frame, carefully polished, holding a photo of them from years ago on a California beach. Laughter frozen in time. Emily's chest tightened as she reached out to touch it. She understood then that Daniel had been trying to communicate without words, to remind them both of who they were, of what they had shared before life grew complicated. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at him, and she felt a mixture of sorrow and hope. "I should have talked to you," Emily whispered. Daniel nodded, a small, relieved smile touching his lips. "So, should I?" They stood there, surrounded by tools, memories, and silence. The room felt warm, alive, as if the past and the present had met. Emily realized that love was not about perfection, but effort. It was about noticing the gaps, confronting the quiet, and choosing each other every day, even when it was hard. The hardest part was not the infidelity she had felt in longing or attention, but the moments before the drifting apart, the unspoken fears, the loneliness in shared spaces. The night ended quietly. They did not speak of Ryan or doubts, but the air was lighter, filled with the possibility of understanding and repair. Emily felt a sense of peace she had not known in months. She knew the path ahead would require patience, effort, and honesty. She also knew that the choice to rebuild could begin now, in the garage, with a simple frame, with acknowledgement and presence. As Emily lay in bed, the hum of the garage replaced by silence, she felt the weight of the week lift slightly. Daniel slept beside her, close but not yet intimate in conversation, yet the space between them seemed smaller. Outside, rain fell softly, covering the city in a quiet rhythm, mirroring the slow, careful rebuilding of trust and love within the walls of their home. Emily closed her eyes, ready to face the days ahead, carrying hope, regret, and the fragile beauty of a love being mended.